Hey Merfolk fans, I'm Joe. Thanks very much for joining me today. If you'd like to support my channel, please check out the link above to my Patreon page. I'll also put the link down below in the description. I'm back with round 2 of a Modern League. In round 1, I beat Eldrazi Tron, or some unique variation of Eldrazi Tron. I won the die roll going into round 2. This is a really beautiful hand, so an easy keep. Gonna go Island AEther Vial here because I'm definitely gonna cast one of these spells next turn, not going to be attacking with Mutavault. Okay, so Flooded Strand, probably blue-white control. This hand should be pretty good against them. The Spreading Seas, not amazing. I have been developing more of a strategy against blue-white control lately with a lot of seas in my deck. You pretty much want to hold Spreading Seas for Celestial Colonnade. Like, if you have no other choice on your turn, except to play Spreading Seas, like no other spells, you should still just do nothing, I think, and just hold Spreading Seas for the Celestial Colonnade. Otherwise, it's just not really worth it to cycle the card. Celestial Colonnade is one of their most important win conditions because, yes, like Jace can deck you, but it takes like I don't know exactly how many turns, like 10 turns for Jace to deck you. And so the time, the clock can be really important against blue-white opponents. And forcing them to take like 1,000 actions to beat you is just better than letting them kill you with Celestial Colonnade. So, you know, you want to be really careful about how you use Spreading Seas in the matchup. I'm going to go ahead and play a Silvergill Adept here. If they play Spell Snare, it's only like a singleton or something like that, so you can comfortably run out your Merfolk on turn 2. Unfortunately, the opponent did have the Spell Snare in this spot, so that was pretty rough. I'm going to take AEther Vial up to 2. Activate Mutavault here. Since we've got the AEther Vial on 2, there's no real reason to risk more Spell Snares, and the plan against blue-white is just to just chip away and chip away. Opponent's already down to 14, and we're going to get to start vialing in creatures. So there's the first Field of Ruin, potentially making our Mutavault worse, but we wouldn't hate having an island instead of that Mutavault. All right, a second AEther Vial. Going to keep this Vial on 2 for the time being. Thassa is really, really, really good against blue-white control. As I've been playing with her more and more lately, as I was just sort of outlining a pretty hard and fast strategy for playing Spreading Seas in the matchup, I've got a pretty hard and fast strategy with Thassa now. You virtually never want her to be a creature against blue-white control, because if they can path her, it's sort of a huge blow to our strategy. If she just sits on the side of the board, not a creature, they have very, very few ways to interact with her. I guess Little Teferi, I think, can bounce her, but then we can just vial her back in. They have like 1 or 2 detention spheres, but otherwise Thassa just sits there and scries every turn, which is amazing. But potentially even more amazing is that we can just chip in with one creature like a Silvergill Adept, and it's impossible for them to block with a Celestial Colonnade or to ambush us with a Snapcaster Mage. We can just keep attacking with one creature. It's unblockable all the time, and it's a real clock if the opponent is just completely unable to block our lone attacker. So we're going to get in with Silvergill here. Opponent is going to cast Snapcaster Mage here just as a sort of ambush viper. And I decide this is okay for me. I don't want to vial in a Lord here and let them use their mana super efficiently. Because, you know, pretty clear that they have a Path to Exile in hand. So I'll just let the opponent trade their Snapcaster for this Silvergill Adept. Play out the second AEther Vial. As I mentioned, you want to be really conservative with the Spreading Seas. Okay, opponent plays a 4th land and passes the turn. I'm going to vial in one of these Lords. And then I'm going to tick the Vial up to 3 and 1. So that on the opponent's end step, I can bring Thassa onto the table, get the value engine going. I'm going to get in with the lone Lord here. If the opponent wants to ambush me again, it's sort of fine. There's that Path to Exile we knew they had in hand. Just ramping us. This is totally fine. You can see we're pretty much at the same spot as the opponent with cards still. able to get our creatures onto the battlefield with the Aether Vials. And the opponent's just going to Field of Ruin on end step, which is sort of fine. We've got 2 Mutavaults. Okay, Plains go, not tapping out for Teferi, pretty patient on the opponent's side. And here comes Thassa. So let's see what kind of work she can do for us. Opponent is at 14 when Thassa comes down. Thassa scries a Mutavault. We'd rather have more action that can enter with Aether Vials, so we scried it to the bottom, and Trickster is pretty good. Let's go ahead and continue the plan of just chipping in. Remember that Mutavault cannot get blocked by anything. So here is a Snapcaster Mage, getting Path to Exile. So I had a choice here. I could flash in a Lord. Opponent would Path the Lord, still try to block Mutavault. I can make Mutavault unblockable. But something I didn't point out, when they flashed in Snapcaster, it was already at the end of Declare blocks, so they couldn't have blocked the Mutavault. So flashing in the Lord was unnecessary. So when the opponent flashed in Snapcaster and targeted Path to Exile, I sort of let them decide whether they wanted to path the Mutavault or take the damage and then sort of see if I bring something else onto the battlefield, in which case, then they could path that. But with Aether Vials, no reason to do that. I'm going to let the opponent path my land, continue to thin the deck, and my hand is feeling just fine. Opponent does not get in with Snapcaster. We saw this in round 1 with Eldrazi. People don't really understand Thassa's unblockable ability. They think that Snapcaster is going to do something. So going to Vial in, I think just Trickster here. So in this case, Snapcaster wasn't going to block anyway, but the thought that the opponent had there, I believe, was that they could leave it back just to potentially block and trade with one of my creatures. Thassa makes that kind of unrealistic. All right, so scrying a Lord, that's pretty awesome. Opponent's on 12. We've got great cards in our hand. Going to try to chip in, take the opponent down to 10. Okay, we do continue to play patiently. Thassa's Scry is going to get us a lot of value over time. Okay, Waterlogged Grove goes to the bottom because the best it can do is we pay 1, make our land drop, and then draw a card. But the card that we would draw is the next one that Thassa is going to scry us into anyway. Keep the vials where they are. And unfortunately, I drew a Minamo, so two lands on the top of the deck. Not much Thassa could have done about that. So going to get in with Trickster here and make it unblockable. I think opponent realizes that Thassa is a bit more impactful than they might have initially thought. And they go for Cryptic Command, bouncing an Aether Vial. Now, this is almost always a play designed to lure you into committing more creatures to the board. Putting a Lord on the table right now would do nothing except turn Thassa into a creature, make her vulnerable to a path, and the Lord is then vulnerable to a board wipe. So totally fine with me. Go ahead and bounce my Aether Vial. Opponent opts. So they do go to attacks with Snapcaster now, makes sense. Also seems to forecast a board wipe, although of course they could be attacking because they know that they can't block with Thassa on the table. And it'd be a little bit silly to Wrath in this point, right? Because I've got a single Trickster. But that's what they do. Potentially they have another Snapcaster in hand to recast that verdict if I get more creatures on board. Their idea here is, since they bounced my most productive Aether Vial, the one that gets all my 2-drops into play, they might go a turn without having to take any damage, but I do have a 3-drop to put into play. So that board wipe resolves, killing a Trickster. Merrow Reejerey enters the battlefield. I scry another Reejerey, which is amazing because I get more value out of this Aether Vial. In game 1, we only have the 4 Reejereys and 2 Thassas. In game 2, we'll have some Kiras also. So drew a land, play the land, play our Aether Vial back out, get in with Reejerey. Opponent goes down to 6. We're feeling pretty good. So I let Narset, well no, I had nothing to do against Narset, sorry, I didn't have any counterspells, but Narset resolves. And she finds Fact or Fiction, which is a pretty scary card. And I think it's sort of a mistake for the opponent to let me go to my turn, because we do run 4 Force of Negation, and being able to counter Factor Fiction would be pretty amazing. The opponent's on 6, so I am sort of priced into getting 1 more Reejerey onto the table. Note that it still doesn't wake up Thassa. She's still chilling in the corner over here as our value engine. Trickster, I think pretty decent here. We do just want gas. The opponent's at 6. So, all right, let me pause here for a second. I think I went a little too deep thinking about like different permutations of combat here. I was thinking play the Spreading Seas to get 4 devotion onto the battlefield. If the opponent like paths a Reejerey kind of early, then we could flash in a Trickster, wake up Thassa. I don't know. It was way overthought. As I mentioned, we do want to keep Seas in hand for Colonnade, and I broke my rule here, and I don't think it was justified. So that was a bit of a mistake for me, especially since Narset is on board. I don't get to draw a card off of Spreading Seas. So sometimes you can like outthink yourself, and it's really good to sort of have some strategy outlined for yourself before you go into these matchups. Also, of course, good to keep track of when you're not able to draw more than 1 card per turn. So these Reejereys trying to get in for lethal. The opponent does have a path here, so they do wait 2 attacks to cast that. Okay, they can't block. They don't have any blockers, so opponent goes down to 4. Unfortunately, we're going to have to deal with this end of turn Factor Fiction. Now, I've played against this card only a few times since it's very new to Modern, being just introduced to the format through Modern Horizons. And I guess I wasn't at this point totally clear on how the game, well, how it works really. So they're going to make piles, and I separated it like this. I guess the thought process being the opponent's at 4. We've got these Aether Vials. I don't think these Planeswalkers are going to do a ton against me, and Click is going to be a pain with our Aether Vials. If we try to vial something in, Click can disrupt us. But if they want to take Click, that's fine. I mean, normally I've heard that Factor Fiction players will just take the pile with the most cards. So this is the way I split it up. And yes, as I mentioned, I was slightly hoping, although I didn't really care which one they took, that they would take the Planeswalkers. I wonder if I could open the game log here. Looks like I can't. Sometimes the replays don't let you. But what ended up happening here, it was a total mess. And at least now I've made this mistake, and I won't make it again. So the opponent made their choice. They took one of the piles. I checked the game log during the match, and I checked it again, and it said that they took the 2 lands and Vendilion Click. So I moved ahead to their turn, thinking that they had 2 lands and Vendilion Click in hand. Now, there's numerous ways that I could have confirmed this for myself. I could have looked at how many cards they had in hand before the Factor Fiction and after, because then it would have told me without a doubt which pile they took. I could have looked at their graveyard, because apparently the cards that they don't take go to the graveyard. There's that Click, there's the 2 lands. So they did take the 2 Planeswalkers, but from this point on, I played this game as if they had Vendilion Click in hand. So it was sort of the worst of both worlds, because now the opponent has 2 Planeswalkers in hand, and I think they have Vendilion Click in hand. So I guess I got kind of nervous and played like... This is weird too, because I guess the system also, the game shows me, it reveals the 2 cards that they put into hand, which was pretty funky, because I dismissed those like this, because I was like, oh, they didn't take those. I was thinking like with Vendilion Click, when they look at your hand, all their cards go to the bottom of their library, but they go to the graveyard, which is apparently one of the reasons that Factor Fiction is so powerful, because with Snapcaster Mage, you can just cast those spells that went to the graveyard anyway. All right, so keep that in mind as I move forward, because I do play with my Aether Vials as if the opponent has a Vendilion Click in hand. All right, so they just ticked down Narset, saw a cryptic command, and they're starting to get some great cards in hand. They resolve a Timely Reinforcements. Here's a Teferi, which I think, they just ripped that off the top, which wouldn't really make sense because then they wouldn't have this number of cards in hand after the Timely Reinforcements. They're going to bounce Thassa, or rather, I think they tuck Thassa. It puts it into my library third from the top. So now I'm thinking I have to Vial Thassa back in a few turns. Gonna flash Trickster in here. The opponent's up to 10, so we do need a clock. And they do have Teferi on the board, which is something that we typically always want to get off as quickly as possible. Since the opponent is tapped out, we can go ahead and actually cast this Lord of Atlantis. Untap a land, though it doesn't really matter what I tap in this situation. And now I'm going to hit, I believe, Teferi with Merrow Reejerey, and then the opponent with Merfolk Trickster. We just don't want them to draw more cards with Teferi. All right, we know that they have a Cryptic Command in hand. Getting in with the soldiers. Okay, there's the board wipe. I slightly overextended to be able to deal with Teferi, so this is a little bit annoying. Hey, opponent plays a Jace. Good thing I drew that Force of Negation. Can bring the Lord in, start attacking. Now, the rule about getting Planeswalkers off the board doesn't really apply to Narset with one counter on her. It only applies if we have 3 Silvergills in hand and we really want to draw cards. Okay, another Lord is actually pretty amazing here. I could Vial it in now to hit for 3 and threaten lethal next turn. But this does that as well, because I can hit for 2, and then if I Vial in a Lord, they both live, it's still lethal next turn, so... Here's that second Narset that they got from the Factor Fiction, but I didn't understand that they weren't just top-decking these Planeswalkers. Okay, so they get to draw more cards. Remember that they still have a Cryptic in hand. Now they have a Cryptic and a Path. Okay, I'm going to play it slow, not bringing in the second Lord here. Keep 3 and 2. I knew that this was the turn where I was going to redraw Thassa, and this is where I blew myself out here, because I was like, okay, all right, well, first of all, let's get in with Master of the Pearl Trident. Opponent casts Cryptic, gonna bounce that thing and draw a card. Now, I thought that the opponent had Vendilion Click, so I passed. This was a mess for a number of reasons. They had 2 mana up, so I could have potentially just cast Thassa anyway, since we know that Cryptic is out of hand. Now they have the Path in hand. With 2 mana up, I could have potentially just cast Thassa if I was afraid of the Vendilion Click. Or I could have just Vialed her in, since the opponent was down to 2 mana. Again, this game, I noticed a lot of things that could have been done better. And here's a Wall of Omens. I am going to have access to double Island Walk. I'm going to have access to Thassa's unblockability. Opponent draws a card. The only card we know that they have right now, I believe, is the Path. So I guess the double Island Walk is not really online, since the Path will deal with one of these lords. I was starting to say, I noticed a lot of stuff, or I learned a lot of stuff in this particular game here. Need to be really careful with understanding what the opponent puts into hand with Factor Fiction, and as I mentioned, there's numerous ways to confirm it. You can confirm with the number of cards in hand, you can confirm with the graveyard. We see the click right here in the graveyard, and it also puts the cards that they take into their hand into the revealed cards pile. So lots of ways to confirm, but I didn't do any of that. So I Vialed in a Lord here, and I'm thinking maybe the opponent is being coy with their Vendilion Click, waiting for me to tap AEther Vial on 3. So I don't do it because I don't want them to ship the Thassa. So I go ahead and just cast Thassa here. And of course the opponent has a counterspell. So the Logic Knot, I can't pay for it because I only have 3 lands. It's so ridiculous. Thassa would have made this game so easy to win, and I had the way to get her onto the board with AEther Vial. But yeah, I totally just mind-gamed myself. But I won't make the same mistake in the future, and hopefully you guys won't as well. I do have another Lord of Atlantis. We know the opponent has the path. So they're going to be able to block here and pass the opponent's turn. We've just got a pointless AEther Vial in hand. They play, I believe, a third Narset Detention Sphere. And in this spot, the opponent actually made a huge mistake themselves, which let me stay in this game. I guess trying to get max value out of Detention Sphere, they're going to exile my 2 AEther Vials rather than my creature. Extremely, extremely greedy. I immediately top deck into a Lord. Swing in for 3 with Island Walk, and the opponent is probably regretting playing like that. So we don't know any cards in their hand at this point. Narset reveals Cryptic. They opt, play a Celestial Colonnade, and pass. So unfortunately, we know the opponent has a Cryptic. We know that Narset is not going to let us immediately draw a card off the Grove. So I'm going to have to wait till their turn to crack that Grove. So tapping a bunch of mana, going to Field of Ruin. Now this would have actually been pretty smart if they Field of Ruin the Waterlogged Grove, since I can't draw a card off that right now anyway. But they hit Minamo. So you can see how both players not playing super precisely optimally, because opponent should have hit my Waterlogged Grove there. And I should have vialed in Thassa. Cryptic Command is going to tap my creatures, so that's gone. And yeah, we're actually feeling sort of decent in this spot, despite that huge mess up that we made trying to hardcast Thassa. So opponent opts. I'm pretty sure they went to the bottom. So Teferi, we're going to cycle our Waterlogged Grove. I would counter that if I drew into a Force. Unfortunately, I only hit another Waterlogged Grove, which is pretty poor, again, because I can't draw a card on my turn with it. Teferi, good for the opponent here, because they get to sort of fix the mistake that they made. They're going to bounce their Detention Sphere, then play it again, getting rid of one of my Lords. So, looks like I've got a window of opportunity here. I could draw the second Thassa to get in for unblockable. I could draw another Island Walk Lord. Tick the AEther Vials up, and Ben is actually quite nice. I can vial it in on the opponent's end step, and since they're at 1 life, you know, everything is a lethal threat at this point. I'm going to be able to cycle the Waterlogged Grove, and then I'll have another redraw with Ben as the game continues. Okay, so opponent just ticks up Teferi, plays a Field of Ruin. This is now turn... Okay, well, cycle the Waterlogged Grove. Force of Negation is amazing. I'm going to vial in Benthic Biomancer. Untap for my 18th turn. So this is a pretty epic game 1. Going to tick up 2 AEther Vials. Trickster, pretty nice. Can tap down a Colonnade. Going to try to get in for the game with Benthic Biomancer here. And they path the Lord, so continuing to draw answers. I am going to let this resolve, I believe. It's a close call. With us so low on resources, it would have been totally justifiable to cast Force in that situation. But better to leave Force of Negation up for something like another Jace or a big Teferi or Factor Fiction, that kind of stuff. We still have a redraw with Benthic Biomancer. We have a Merfolk Trickster. Ticking Teferi up. Looks like the opponent is activating Celestial Colonnade. They've got enough mana to attack and then leave it back as a blocker. But Trickster is going to kind of ruin that plan, because I can just tap it down, and now I've got 2 attackers. And the opponent had nothing to do against that. Even if they did, I would have had Force of Negation up. And I was extremely fortunate to get out of that one alive because of that huge mess up against Factor Fiction. So lesson learned, be really careful that you know what cards the opponent has in hand once they resolve Factor Fiction. Let's see, anything else that I did wrong in this match? Don't play Spreading Seas. Be super patient, wait for them to play a Celestial Colonnade. Because imagine if they weren't able to start attacking with this Colonnade. They're down to 11 cards in their deck. That's insane. It's possible that if we I have 7 Seas in my deck. If I just wait and put them on these Celestial Colonnades, they might actually just deck themselves before they have a chance to win the game. So yeah, just be really intelligent about how you use your Spreading Seas in the matchup. We do want to board out some of them in games 2 and 3, but when we bring in Kira, we want to be able to attack with her. Not always, but in some cases. And Celestial Colonnade makes it really hard to attack with Kira. So having Seas in the deck post board is totally reasonable against Celestial Colonnade. All right, so we won game 1. Let's go to game 2 and see how the sideboard looked. All right, back for game 2. Let's take a look at the sideboard. And I want to mention that I was lower on time than the opponent after game 1. Now, even for Merfolk against blue-white control, it can be difficult to win 2 games in 10 minutes. So if the opponent had won that first game, really difficult for me with 10 minutes remaining on my clock to close things out. Even up a game, 10 minutes is a little bit tricky. What's very, very different from Magic Online from playing in paper is being up a game doesn't matter if the round goes to time. If I time out, even if I'm up a game, I'm going to lose the match. So I need to win this game within these 10 minutes. And if I lose, I need to have enough time on my clock to make sure that I at least have a chance to win a game 3. So this is an example of why doing replays works a lot better for these kinds of explanatory videos than just doing live commentary. The match was kind of flying by. We had so many actions to take. We really need this replay format to unpack everything and really discuss, what was great, what was not great, and all of the details. So it looks like I took out 6 of my Seas, leaving in just a single Spreading Seas. I think I would change that in the future. I think I want to leave in maybe 2 or 3 Spreading Seas because, as I was mentioning, I do bring in the 2 Kiras, and by herself, she can be an amazing clock. I mean, we do need to be afraid of Vendilion Clique, but for example, I guess if they say we have a Seas on a Colonnade, and we're attacking into their open mana, if they flash in a Restoration Angel or if they flash in a Vendilion Clique, if we have a Trickster in hand, we can just flash that in and tap that creature, let Kira keep attacking in. So we have ways to tap down sort of flashed in blockers with Trickster, but Seas just seems to synergize pretty nicely with being able to attack with Kira. So it's something to keep in mind. I think I want more than just a single Spreading Seas in the future against blue-white. Also, as I mentioned, the clock is super important, and if they can't attack with Celestial Colonnade, and they're forced to try to deck you with Jace, or some other tricks with their Planeswalkers, then they could potentially time out. So definitely worth keeping those Seas in. But during this match, I took out 6 Spreading Seas. It looks like that was... I took out 1 land because they constantly ramp us with Path to Exiles. Since I'm on 19 lands, I only feel comfortable going down to 18 right now. So 6 Seas out, 1 land out. I brought in all 3 Dismembers. Since I'm up a game, I really want to make it difficult for them to win a second game quickly with something like a Baneslayer Angel. So Dismembers, all 3 Dismembers coming in. 2 Kiras came in, and then 2 Deprives, and I think that's it. So yeah, 7 cards. 3 Dismembers, 2 Deprives, and I just said it. I'll remember it as we go along. I don't want to take too much more time here. It was 2 Deprives, 3 Dismembers, and 2 Kiras. And you can see we have a Kira in our opening hand. This is a solid opener. Mutavaults can attack. So even though we don't have double blue, they're going to probably give us another blue source. Opponent opening with Celestial Colonnade, and we're both playing slightly faster in this game. Okay, opponent passes. I'm going to go for the turn 2 Silvergill Adept. Opponent opts. I draw another Force of Negation. That's an excellent card. Opponent goes for Teferi, and I'm going to go ahead and pitch a Merfolk Trickster. I like all my counter magic, even though I can't really cast the Deprive yet. I will be able to cast that sooner or later. So we exile a Trickster. I've got plenty of bodies with these Mutavaults right now. Silvergill Adept, a pretty nice draw, especially with the opponent tapped out. They're going to start taking damage. Oh, but I made the same mistake in the replay as I made in the game. I really should have activated a Mutavault and attacked, but when I drew the Silvergill, I was thinking, okay, I can play that second main. Went to attacks, and then realized I didn't have any other Merfolk. So, again, learning from the replays, be very careful. Don't rush into attacks. Definitely, the opponent should be at 16 here, not 18. Okay, opponent playing patiently. There's that second blue source. Gonna get in with Silvergill. Opponent goes down to 16, should be 14. And I can pass with mana up. I'm gonna float mana from Mutavault. I don't know what I'm gonna use it for. Okay, they don't play anything, so I don't have to use my mana. Again, they're just passing here, so not a whole lot going on. Getting in with Silvergill. They're going to use a Path to Exile. This is going all very much according to plan. So I was thinking, so they have, here's that colonnade I mentioned while discussing the sideboard. Kira's not super amazing with the colonnade, able to sit back and block. So probably better just to keep putting Merfolk onto the board. Okay, well, that's a nice draw. Things are going pretty well for us so far in this game. Opponent hasn't done too much. And you can see when I kept the hand with Deprive and Kira, I didn't have double blue, but the opponent has already ramped me twice with, or rather, fixed my mana twice with Field of Ruin and then ramped me with Path to Exile. So that's going to happen, so don't be afraid of keeping, one blue source. All right, opponent goes for Jace. Things going perfectly according to plan. Gonna cast Force of Negation. Don't even have to exile a card from my hand. Now I'm gonna activate Mutavault and get in. Hopefully the opponent goes down to 12. Well, they have a path for Mutavault. Unfortunate. But they are gonna go down to 14. It should be 12 if I had activated that Mutavault earlier. And I chose not to flash in Trickster on the end step just because they might want to block with Celestial Colonnade, in which case I would want to tap it down with Trickster. All right, Waterlogged Grove is one of the better lands we could draw in this spot. Okay, getting in with Silvergill. Opponent going to go for Snapcaster here. I'm going to Deprive the Snapcaster. It's one of the few creatures in their deck they play, and Deprive is the only counter spell that can actually stop a Snapcaster. All right, they've got nothing beyond the Snapcaster, so they go down to 12. Again, it should be 10. Now it should be 9. Okay, opponent just keeps passing through. And remember, I'm holding this Trickster in case they try to block with Celestial Colonnade. Okay, that's their plan here. So let's get that Trickster on the table. Opponent down to 3 cards. We've got a redraw with Waterlogged Grove when we need it. Okay, opponent's going to Wrath. You can see why it's important to only keep a couple of creatures on board. All right. So I felt kind of stuck here. Played out this AEther Vial. As I mentioned a couple times now, Kira just not great with Celestial Colonnade on the board. They have played a Verdict, though, so it might have been a good time to get her out. But instead, I just chose to play out a Master of the Pearl Trident. It resolved. The opponent just passes without even playing a land, I think. Taking Vial up. Play the second Vial. Can attack into the Colonnade. Opponent is going Factor Fiction. I'm definitely going to try to counter that. It resolves. Remember, the opponent should be at 7 if we attacked with that Mutavault previously. Here's another Jace. That one is going to resolve. They bounce the Master of the Pearl Trident. But I've still got a lot of gas in hand. Drew into another Lord. We need to be really careful about Detention Sphere here. But with these Vials ticking up, I feel pretty decent. Unfortunately, the opponent is getting to Brainstorm each turn. So they're getting lots of great answers to whatever we're trying to do here. All right, let's Vial in another Lord. Opponent looks like they're going to respond with Click. They look at my hand, and they ship the Kira, which is interesting because I was thinking it wasn't that amazing in this spot because of Celestial Colonnade, but Kira is still really great in the matchup to stop all the Path to Exiles and Detention Spheres, and Jace from bouncing our creatures. I was going to be able to get her out next turn. Unfortunately, the opponent saw her and shipped her, but I'm still going to be able to use an Aether Vial on 3. Vial in the second Lord on the opponent's end step. Take both vials up. Dismember is an interesting draw. Okay, unfortunately, they get to tap and draw. Pass through. They're going to brainstorm again. They have not cracked a fetch since the last time they brainstormed, so they're sort of brainstorm locked here, seeing the same cards over and over again. I'm hoping that's going to play out, to my advantage. Opponent gets in with click. So they play Teferi, and it's possible that I should have dismembered the click in response, since he turns off instants, but I could always play Dismember on my main phase. The thing that Teferi does that I didn't quite realize during the match is it prevents me from dismembering a Celestial Colonnade because I can't cast instants. All right, opponent is going to try to bounce the Vial, and as I mentioned in game 1, that's a trap because there's the Verdict. And I get to Vial in Reejerey, so this has echoes of the first game. There's a second 3-drop, so that's pretty great. Gonna take Jace out. But the opponent did get in some brainstorming. A Teferi's still on the board. Opponent plays a land, passes the turn. I chose not to Vial in the second Reejerey. It's kind of close in this spot. Immediately gonna cycle that Waterlogged Grove. Ben is great because I can get some value out of his loot. Gonna try to tap down the Celestial Colonnade here. Opponent floats blue. Counters the Lord. Now I was getting low-ish on my clock. I was very aware that I was lower in time than the opponent, and if I did lose this game, it looked like the opponent was starting to turn the corner. I might not be able to win a game 3 in time. So starting to rush, potentially not making the most optimal plays. Tried to get in at Teferi here, but after all that brainstorming with Jace, of course he's got a very nice answer here. This was kind of, well, not kind of, this was very messy. I vialed in Ben to adapt, even though I knew there was nothing I could draw to counter the Snapcaster Mage with the mana that I have on board right now. I can't play instants with Dismember, and if Snapcaster just is going to target a path, now the opponent has a block and a path instead of just a block. So just really, really not using my creatures well. I've really felt the pressure of the clock ticking down. Opponent gets Path to Exile, gets to deal with both of my creatures. With Vials here, even through Teferi, preventing these Dismembers from doing anything really valuable, I think I still had a really good shot. I played a Lord into a counterspell when I could have just gotten it onto the table with Aether Vial. Okay, opponent finds a Narset. She's going to tick down, probably find some good stuff. Path to Exile is really starting to slam the door shut. Opponent activates Colonnade, and I've got a really nice answer for it in hand, but unfortunately Teferi says no. Those curse effects, the static abilities of all these planeswalkers, each opponent can cast spells only anytime they could cast a sorcery. It's just too strong. Gonna Vial in Reejerey, but my hopes and dreams have been crushed by the opponent drawing that Path to Exile. So at this point, I should have a Ben in hand. I should have a Lord in hand. I do have these Dismembers in hand, but in combat they're not even useful right now. But with the opponent on just a single Path to Exile, remember they did flash in Snap. It should have just traded with Reejerey. Now I could I don't know, potentially have a much better attack here. Gonna cast this, try to tap the Colonnade. I have no idea what I'm doing here since the clock is getting so low. Now I've got every island in my deck except for one. The second Reejerey resolves, and Really starting to think about scooping here. I'm just trying to make the opponent get a few extra seconds off their clock. Deprive. So just pass to them, make them use their clock. Since they have a colonnade attacking, they're going to be able to win pretty quickly. Again, Spreading Seas could make their game 2 take potentially another 5 minutes, because what are they going to do with these guys to win the game? They literally can't win the game. This guy can just return some creatures to my hand. He can cast sorceries on my turn, but it's not like Jace where he can just deck me. So Celestial Colonnade, really their best way of closing out games in a reasonable amount of time. I activate AEther Vial, try to get another second or two off the opponent's clock. And at that point, I believe I took one more turn, hardcast Silvergill Adept. Opponent had the counter. Activate Colonnade. And so we ended that game with almost identical clocks. I was like 7 seconds ahead. So, unfortunately, they got game 2. I definitely had the tools to win that game, but I didn't. So it's going to be really tricky in game 3. Both players are going to be rushing like crazy. Let's go ahead and see how things wrapped up. All right, back for game 3 of this epic match against Blue-White Control. I'm going to be on the play. So, mistakes have been made so far in this match, but really happy about the experience though, because it's really helped me solidify my strategy for the matchup. This is definitely a keep. We're gonna want, Lords to accelerate the clock a little bit. Blue source would be nice for Deprive, but we've got Aether Vial, we've got creatures in card draw. Keep for us, and the opponent kept as well. So we're gonna play fast. Okay. Take Vial up, gonna cast Silvergill Adept, hope to dodge Spell Snare. We do. Opponent gets a tapped land. We drew a Force for the turn. Second Aether Vial is pretty poor. Opponent immediately paths the Silvergill Adept. I am still ahead on clock. Drew a Lord, which is fantastic. I can activate a Mutavault, get in. Actually could have brought the Lord in right away, but just play patterns are so ingrained. Going to keep that in my hand. Try to dodge something like a Detention Sphere. Drew another Force off of the second Silvergill, which is pretty nice. So Timely Reinforcements, we have two free counter spells in hand. So pitch the Deprive. At this point, I am a few seconds below the opponent, but I've got the clock here. So I'm going to be able to activate 2 Mutavaults. I'd love to draw a blue spell, and I did. So things going really, really well for me here. The free counter spell lets me activate both Mutavaults comfortably and swing in here for 11. Really dangerous clock. If the opponent wraths our board after playing their 4th land here, we can Vial in Silvergill and we can swing for 6. If they don't have the Wrath, instead something like a Jace can bounce a Lord, we can Vial him back in. I guess they could go for like Timely Reinforcements, which I would counter. Although I would probably think about it, because if they did Timely Reinforcements, they would gain 5 life, go up to 11. I can Vial in a Silvergill Adept and swing for 12 with Island Walk. If I draw a blue card, well, no, I can't cast Force for free on my turn. So if they had Timely, I feel like I would counter it. If they had... Yeah, I definitely would counter it, because then they would just have like Path mana up, and they're still at 6. And if they Path the Lord, I can still attack for 6. So would definitely counter Timely. Would counter pretty much anything that I could counter here. But it's important to point out that even if they Wrath with these 2 Mutavaults and Silvergill getting Vialed in, we would have this game wrapped up. So they did just pass. I felt pretty awesome about it, because I can Vial in Silvergill. They're going to have the Cryptic here. I can just leave up mana to counter and still have lethal just with Merfolk. Another Lord, just for the rub-ins. And another Lord. So Vial and a Lord instantaneously. I am definitely below the opponent on time now. Try to get in for 11 here. Opponent's going to tap really low. Cryptic trying to tap and draw, and we have the Force. So this was the fastest game I've ever played against any control deck for sure. Tons and tons of clock pressure. I won that game, I believe, in less than a minute and a half, which I don't know. It was it was pretty hectic. I need to take a deep breath even after doing the replay. It is pretty intense. So what a hand that developed brilliantly. The two forces countering the timely reinforcements and the cryptic command, letting me win in a timely manner. I should have won game 2. Took a couple of missteps. But now we know with this build, I think we want to leave in around 3 Spreading Seas, hit those colonnades, make the opponent take more time to beat us with their planeswalkers, also potentially make it easy to keep chipping in with Kira for damage, whereas Celestial Colonnade would typically sort of prevent us from doing that. So thanks very much for tuning in for this this long round, guys. I know this video is getting really long, but I thought it was a super interesting round. Currently 2-0 in this league after beating Eldrazi Tron in round 1, and now Blue-White Control in round 2. Tune in for the next video where I'll be back with round 3 of this Modern League. Please subscribe to the channel if you haven't yet. Please leave your thoughts down below in the comment section. And if you'd like to support my channel, please take a second and have a look at my Patreon page. I'll see you guys again soon. Bye.